On the air with breaking news, President Trump has apparently fired his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, according to a senior administration official and a source familiar with the matter. This comes after NBC News learned that the president has grown frustrated with his Attorney General in recent days, according to multiple sources. I want to get right to our team covering all of it. Our Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent Kelly O'Donnell is joining us. We've also got our White House correspondent Monica Alba as well. Kelly, let me start with you. This is not altogether surprising, considering the reporting from NBC that the president was frustrated with Bondi's performance leading the Department of Justice.
And we've often seen the president let some of his intentions, feelings, concerns bubble out publicly as one measure of how he makes these decisions. For Pam Bondi, this is a blow because she has been a very loyal.
All right, guys, Dr. John here. Okay, so this is absolutely wild. A federal judge didn't just rule against Pam Bondi. They dismantled her entire legal strategy in open court. The elaborate framework she built to keep the Epstein files hidden from Congress and the public was held up to the Constitution and collapsed.
Sort of friend and ally of the president for a long time, going back to Florida, assisting in the first Trump term. And this, in many ways, comes down to a representation of the frustration that President Trump has, that his vision for how he could exact retribution against political rivals and those who had, in his perception, done him wrong at some past point, to be brought to justice. That has not happened, even though this Department of Justice under Pam Bondi has attempted to do so in a number of areas where we've seen the failed attempts to prosecute James Comey or Letitia James. Then there's the broader issue of the Epstein files. There was a moment where Pam Bondi, who in the journey of her time as Attorney General has been both loyal but has also committed some self-inflicted errors. She talked about having the so-called Epstein list on her desk, and that never materialized. She had led people to believe there would be more coming on Epstein, and then initially last summer, the Department of Justice said the files would be closed, there was no action to be taken, and that triggered a groundswell that was a broader political coalition than you might expect, certainly those in the MAGA community, and then those who were very supportive of the survivor community around Epstein.
Instantly, the judge's words left no room for interpretation. Unconstitutional, unlawful, outside the rule of law. The top law enforcement officer in the country just got judicially annihilated for breaking the law. And then, in a twist that reveals everything you need to know about how this White House actually operates, Donald Trump watched this legal disaster unfold in real time. He watched his hand-picked loyalist.
Hallie, you've talked to a number of those survivors, and there was a political engine that developed around them, bringing it to a point where Congress required the Department of Justice to produce those files. They have done so, but only in a limited way. It has not been the full set of files. So Pam Bondi has not been able to insulate the president from some of the criticism related to the Epstein ordeal. She has not been able to deliver on some of his desired prosecutions, and that frustration has apparently bubbled up. All the ways in which she has been loyal were certainly put in a back seat, and she was in the seat with him yesterday, going in the beast, as it's known, the presidential limousine, to the Supreme Court to listen to one of the key ideas of his time in office, which is birthright citizenship that he wants to challenge. Apparently, she was unable to save herself in those personal, direct moments with the president. She attended his speech last night in the White House. So personal relationships only go so far. Loyalty is sometimes only one way when we observe Donald Trump. And Pam Bondi, Attorney General of the United States, is out. Hallie?
As we're looking at some of these images, Kelly, that video of the apparently now former Attorney General being seen with President Trump as he visited the Supreme Court yesterday. Let me bring in Monica Alba now. So the question is,
the woman he installed specifically to be his shield and his sword get humiliated on the national stage. And what did he do? Did he stand by her? Did he issue a statement defending her valiant effort? No. He reached for his phone, opened his social media platform of choice, and fired her in front of millions of people. A rage-fueled public execution via True Social. No private conversation, no dignified exit.
Who takes her place? This is an incredibly prominent cabinet position. It's critically important to the functioning of the Trump administration. administration. It is a department that the president has a personal interest in and has taken an interest in. We know that the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, has been somebody who has been vocal, who has been prominent on the airwaves. There's also some reporting that we have from sources that former Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin may also be in the mix.
Yeah, and of course, he is already in the cabinet, Lee Zeldin, Hallie, that you referenced there as the EPA administrator. So he is somebody who could be potentially tapped for that. But it does appear now that the president spoke by phone with another outlet and seemed to confirm that Todd Blanche, the deputy attorney general, would now take the place of interim attorney general, at least at this moment, while they do figure out this transition and before they do make any potential announcements. It is typical for the president of the United States to be the one that usually shares some of this information on Truth Social or in some kind of an appearance or announcement, but he has yet to do that.
Just a digital pink slip broadcast to the entire world, signaling that when you fail to protect the king, you are discarded like yesterday's garbage. This entire sequence of events is a masterclass in political chaos and judicial accountability. It lays bare, in the starkest possible terms, exactly what this administration has been trying to do behind closed doors and exactly how the courts are standing in the way. The timeline is brutal and unforgiving.
But as Kelly just pointed out, Pam Bondi has been a ubiquitous figure in this White House. She has attended many of the events. She has traveled with the president quite frequently. She's been at his side more than, of course, any other attorney general in recent memory. When you think about the sort of separation between the head of the Department of Justice and a White House and that wall that goes between the two, that is something that was essentially erased in this administration. And the president had Pam Bondi at his side all of the time. And there was a message posted some months ago in which he seemed to and appeared to post what was meant to be a private message that started with the word Pam : and had a directive about actions that he wanted to see her take on when it came to potential indictments for people that he wanted to see happen in a faster way, with more of an urgency to it, directing her essentially to really treat that as a top priority. So we know that that frustration had been bubbling since then, and the White House hadn't confirmed that that was something that the president meant to make public.
In the waning days of March, a federal judge issued a ruling that essentially declared Bondi's entire operational philosophy at the Justice Department to be a legal fiction. The judge said her workaround, a clever, cynical attempt to reclassify the Epstein documents under the umbrella of executive privilege, was designed for one purpose and one purpose only: to obstruct Congress, to hide evidence.
But he did, and we later were able to confirm and report that that was exactly the case. And the president hasn't been shy about that. He has said publicly that he would like to see more cases go forward, and he has expressed that mounting frustration when he feels that that hasn't happened in certain particular cases. So this was a situation in which the president really has resisted a lot of high turnover in his cabinet. Of course, some weeks ago, we did see the DHS secretary, former Secretary Kristi Noem, fired from her position before former senator, now the new DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin, was put into place. And that had been the first actual cabinet secretary that was ousted and then replaced. So Pam Bondi will be the second in a very critical role here, as she has been involved in many of the very urgent matters and situations that the president has been dealing with, from everything on national security to, again, some of these more local and domestic investigations that he wanted her to pursue.
And Monica, as you were delivering that report to us, one of our colleagues, Gabe Gutierrez, is reporting that according to a source familiar with the decision, it's Todd Blanche who will step into place as the acting attorney general for now. Again, not unexpected. We will see if that holds potentially for Blanche as a permanent position. Monica Alba, thank you. Kelly O'Donnell, our thanks to you as well. That does it for now for our NBC News special report, but we've got much more ahead on our streaming channel, NBC News Now, online at NBCnews.com, and then more, of course, later tonight on Nightly. I'm Hallie Jackson. Thanks for watching. Talk soon.
To shield the powerful from the consequences of their associations. That's not how the law works. That's not how the Constitution was designed. And the judge made sure that Bondi, and by extension the entire administration, understood that lesson in the most painful way possible. Let's pull back the curtain on Bondi's grand strategy, because it's a window into the soul of this Justice Department. Her plan was to create what she openly called a personalized Justice Department. Let that phrase sink in for a moment. Not the People's Justice Department, not the United States Justice Department, a personalized one. She wanted to take the Epstein files, documents that Congress had lawfully subpoenaed, documents that the public has an overwhelming interest in seeing, and wave a magic wand over them. That wand was called executive privilege. She claimed that because these files might touch upon matters related to the executive branch, the president had the unilateral, unreviewable power to lock them in a safe and throw away the key. It was a legal Hail Mary. It was a scheme to bypass the co-equal branch of government established by Article 1 of the Constitution. She was essentially telling Congress, you don't get to see these. I've decided they're privileged. End of discussion. And the judge looked at that argument and called it what it was, a fraudulent abuse of power. The ruling stated that her actions were designed to operate entirely outside established legal procedures. The judge used the word unlawful. In the dry, technical language of the federal judiciary, that is the equivalent of a public flogging. The judge struck down the entire scheme, completely and with prejudice. And this wasn't some obscure procedural motion that only appellate nerds care about. This was the main event. This was the case everyone in Washington was tracking. The media had been camped outside the courthouse. Congress had been threatening inherent contempt proceedings. Investigators were salivating at the prospect of the files being pried loose. And Bondi walked into that arena with her personalized theory of justice and got carried out on her shield. The judge humiliated her. The judge exposed her playbook for exactly what it was, a desperate attempt to use the solemn power of the Attorney General's office to run cover for the president's darkest liabilities. And Trump, watching this slow-motion train wreck from the residence, saw only one thing: failure. He saw his Attorney General losing the single most important case he had assigned her. He saw the entire DOJ being exposed as a tool for unconstitutional cover-ups, and he saw the walls closing in. The Epstein files, which he had promised to be transparent about, were about to be pried open by a court order that his own appointee failed to stop. So he did what he always does when someone becomes a liability rather than an asset. He cut her loose. Days after the ruling dropped, the notification went out on Truth Social. She was gone, terminated, fired. The timing here is absolutely savage and reveals the reactive, panicked nature of the decision-making inside this White House. Just days before she got the axe, Bondi had been sitting in a congressional hearing room, sweating under the hot lights, doing her best impression of a street brawler. She wasn't acting like the Attorney General of the United States. She was acting like a cable news pundit who had wandered into the wrong building. She called a sitting Democratic senator a washed-up loser. She sneered. She deflected. She was combative and hostile, trying to bully her way through questions about the Epstein cover-up and the weaponization of the department against Trump's enemies. That behavior, the unhinged aggression, is the telltale sign of someone who knows the legal ground beneath them is quicksand. When you have the law on your side, you speak calmly about precedent and statute. When you have nothing, you insult the questioner. She knew the judge's ruling was coming. She knew her workaround was a legal house of cards. And she knew that if she couldn't project strength and intimidation, she'd look like exactly what she was, a lawyer who just got her clock cleaned in federal court. And then the gavel fell. The judge's order hit the docket. And within hours, the leaks started pouring out of the Justice Department. The cases she had been zealously pursuing against Trump's political foes, the vendetta prosecutions against figures like James Comey and Letitia James, those cases started collapsing. They fell apart like wet tissue paper. Why? Because career prosecutors and witnesses inside the department looked at the judge's ruling and realized they were being asked to participate in a conspiracy. They saw that the courts were not going to tolerate the use of the DOJ as a private revenge squad. When the Attorney General's signature legal theory on document concealment is ruled unconstitutional, it sends a shockwave through every other case being built on the same rotten foundation. The message was clear. The judiciary is watching and it is not amused. Trump confirmed the calculus with his own mouth, as he often does. Speaking to a friendly outlet, he admitted that the court loss sealed her fate. He didn't dress it up in the usual platitudes about wanting to spend more time with family. He said, essentially, she didn't do her job. She failed to make the Epstein mess go away. She failed to protect him. He wanted someone who could wave a wand and make legal problems disappear, and Bondi turned out to be a mere mortal who had to operate within the confines of the Constitution. And for that unforgivable sin, she was out. The message to the rest of the cabinet was deafening. You are hired to protect me from the law. If you cannot do that, you are useless to me. This sequence is devastating because it exposes the fundamental, irreconcilable conflict at the heart of Trump's relationship with the Justice Department. He does not view the DOJ as an independent institution sworn to uphold the Constitution. He views it as his personal law firm. He wanted it to be a shield to deflect investigations and a sword to stab his enemies. And when Bondi tried to execute that vision, when she tried to twist the doctrine of executive privilege into a pretzel to hide the Epstein files, she got caught. And the moment she got caught, Trump didn't defend the principle of executive power. He just fired the person who failed to execute the scheme successfully. Now, let's get into the legal weeds for a moment, because understanding why Bondi's scheme was so obviously illegal is crucial to understanding why this defeat was so total and so humiliating. The foundational principle here is non-negotiable. Congress has the power of subpoena. It is a core, inherent power of the legislative branch. Congress can demand documents from the executive branch. Congress can require officials to turn over evidence relevant to an investigation. The president cannot just say no and make it all go away. Yes, executive privilege is a real thing. It exists in the penumbras of the Constitution. It protects the confidentiality of communications between the president and his closest advisors on matters of national security and sensitive policy deliberations. But it is not a cloak of invisibility. It does not cover up evidence of crimes. It does not apply when Congress has a compelling legislative or investigative need. And it absolutely, positively does not apply just because the president wants to hide information that is politically embarrassing or legally perilous. What Bondi tried to do was stretch the concept of executive privilege until it snapped. She tried to claim that the Epstein files, documents detailing the associations, travel, and communications of a convicted sex trafficker, somehow fell under the umbrella of confidential presidential advice. She tried to reclassify them, a bureaucratic sleight of hand designed to create a paper trail that would justify withholding them. She wanted to create a personalized department where she, as the Attorney General, had the sole unchecked discretion to decide what Congress could and could not see. The judge's ruling was a masterclass in judicial clarity. The judge said, in essence, that's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. The judge said the scheme operates outside the rule of law. It violates constitutional principles. It is unlawful. The judge was saying, this is not a close call. This is not a case where reasonable legal minds can differ. What you tried to do is clearly illegal, and you got caught with your hand in the cookie jar. The judge struck down the entire edifice. The judge said those files have to be turned over. Congress gets to see them. You cannot hide behind a made-up, personalized version of executive privilege. That ruling is the reason Pam Bondi is now a private citizen. It is the death knell for the personalized Justice Department. And it is a flashing neon sign to everyone inside the administration that the courts will not rubber stamp lawlessness, even when it's dressed up in a suit and given a title. The broader implications of this ruling are seismic. If the Justice Department cannot use executive privilege as a workaround to hide the Epstein files from Congress, what else is suddenly exposed? What other documents that were swept under the rug are now going to see the light of day? This ruling opens the floodgates. It is a judicial mandate that says the DOJ must comply with congressional subpoenas. It says executive privilege is not an absolute shield. It says the president cannot use his own attorney general to hide evidence from a co-equal branch of government. That is a foundational bedrock principle of the separation of powers, and this judge just reinforced it with a sledgehammer. And remember the context. Bondi's other failures make this specific defeat even more toxic. She was leading the charge on prosecutions against Trump's enemies, the so-called retribution cases. But according to leaks that began surfacing almost immediately after the judge's ruling, those cases started collapsing. The Comey investigation stalled. The James prosecution hit a wall. Why? Because the career officials inside the Justice Department, the ones who aren't political appointees and who plan to be there long after this administration is gone, saw the writing on the wall. They saw a federal federal judge ruled that the Attorney General was operating an unconstitutional scheme. They realized that if they continued to participate in these vendetta prosecutions, they might be next on the witness stand, explaining why they went along with a conspiracy to violate civil rights and abuse prosecutorial power. The judge's ruling didn't just block the Epstein cover-up, it sent a chill down the spine of every lawyer working on every politically motivated case in the building. It told them, the courts are not going to tolerate this. You will be held accountable. Bondi's combative behavior in the hearings right before her firing now looks even more pathetic in hindsight. She was like a cornered animal, lashing out, calling people names, trying to project strength because she knew the legal foundation beneath her was about to crumble. That's not the behavior of a confident attorney general. That's the behavior of someone who knows the game is up. And when the judge's gavel came down, it proved that every insult she hurled at those senators was just a smokescreen to cover up the fact that she had no legal leg to stand on. And Trump's response, the true social firing, is the most revealing piece of all. He didn't have a chief of staff handle it quietly. He didn't release a gracious statement thanking her for her service. He pulled out his phone and fired her like he was canceling a subscription. He publicly humiliated the top law enforcement officer in the country. He did it in front of millions of people. The message to the rest of the administration is terrifyingly clear. Loyalty means nothing if you lose. If you fail to deliver the goods, if you fail to stop the courts, if you fail to protect me, you are gone. You will be thrown overboard, and you will be embarrassed on the way out. This management style, this cult of personality, is why the administration is bleeding talent and why no serious legal mind wants to go anywhere near the Attorney General's office, because the next AG knows the deal. They have to choose between two impossible paths. Path 1, follow the law, respect the Constitution, and refuse to be Trump's personal fixer. Result, fired for disloyalty. Path 2, try to be the fixer, cook up unconstitutional workarounds, and get sued. Result, lose in court, get humiliated by a federal judge, and then get fired for failure anyway. There is no winning. There is only surviving until the axe falls. Let's crystallize the key takeaways from this entire sordid affair, because this is a story that has layers upon layers of significance. First, the judicial rebuke is total and complete. This wasn't a procedural loss on a technicality. This was a federal judge looking at the core function of the Attorney General's office and declaring it unlawful. The judge ruled that the scheme to hide the Epstein files was unconstitutional. This validates everything critics have said about the weaponization of the Justice Department. Democrats have been screaming from the rooftops that this administration uses the DOJ as a personal tool of retribution and cover-up. Now, a federal judge has essentially agreed with them in writing on the public docket. This ruling is Exhibit A in any future impeachment proceeding. It's proof that the courts recognize the abuse of power. Second, the firing reveals the transactional nature of power in this White House. Pam Bondi was loyal. She was a true believer. She went on television and defended the indefensible. She tried to twist the law into a pretzel to serve the president's personal interests. And the moment she failed, the moment the court said no, she was discarded like trash. Not privately, not respectfully, but publicly and viciously. This sends a message to every single person working in that administration. You are only as good as your last court victory. If you cannot stop the law from closing in, you are worthless to him. This is going to make it impossible to recruit anyone of genuine legal stature to the department. Third, the Epstein files are coming out. This is the practical, tangible consequence of the judge's ruling. Despite every effort, every workaround, and every claim of privilege, the courts have ordered the release. Congress will get these files, and whatever is in them, whatever names, whatever dates, whatever details, is going to become public. Trump appointed Bondi specifically to prevent this day from coming. He wanted a loyalist who would find a way, anyway, to keep those documents buried, and the courts just blew up that entire strategy. The floodgates are open. Fourth, the broader legal strategy is in ruins. The personalized Justice Department is dead. The theory that the Attorney General can unilaterally reclassify documents to avoid congressional oversight has been struck down. This ruling doesn't just affect the Epstein files, it affects every other investigation and every other subpoena file. fight. It tells the DOJ that they cannot play these games. It tells Congress that they have the power to enforce their subpoenas. It emboldens the legislative branch to push harder and investigate deeper. And it leaves Trump more legally exposed than he has ever been. Fifth, the political fallout is catastrophic. Trump's approval rating is already in the basement. This story, the AG caught in an illegal cover-up, the humiliating court loss, the rage-fueled public firing, is the kind of narrative that sinks presidencies. It feeds into every negative perception voters have about corruption and chaos. It gives Democratic candidates a pristine, gift-wrapped issue to run on in the midterms. And it puts Republican senators in an impossible position. They have to answer for why the Attorney General was trying to hide evidence and why the president fired her for failing to do so successfully. The cascading scandals are not slowing down. They are accelerating. The judge's ruling, the Bondi firing, the exposure of the unconstitutional workaround, this is all happening against the backdrop of a crashing stock market, an unauthorized war, and a Supreme Court that has stripped away immunity protections. Everything is breaking at once, and the message to the next Attorney General is clear. You are walking into a trap. The courts will not let you be the president's personal lawyer. And if you try, you will end up just like Pam Bondi, humiliated, defeated, and fired on social media. The Epstein files are coming. The impeachment momentum is building. And the man in the Oval Office is running out of people to blame for the walls closing in. This is the story to watch. Stay tuned.